Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It's Friday morning and today is as good a day as ever to be a 2-video day. So in this video we're going to discuss Kiely Rodni's autopsy, yes, again. And in my other video, which will come out later over on my other channel, Michelle Walks, I'll be discussing the autopsy report of 4-year-old Serenity McKinney, which came out yesterday. So that's it's horrible. A 4-year-old little girl should not have an autopsy report, especially when the manner of death is homicide. But I am going to go through it, and obviously that kind of content is not for everybody, so make the decision yourself, and I completely understand if you don't want to watch that video. In this video, we're going to discuss Kiely Rodni's autopsy report. Now, I've done 2 videos on this already, and I did say I wasn't going to do another video, and this isn't a video going through the autopsy report. A lot of people in my comments when I did those videos said, Michelle, you're not an expert. You know, leave it to the experts. The experts, I might find that this autopsy report is inadequate and there's potential for there to be a cover-up because people want there to have been a cover-up. I understand. I totally understand. I've gone through every possible theory and angle of this case, apart from the most bizarre. But for part of the case, I was absolutely convinced there was foul play involved. You know, the way that the friends behaved, the way that Sammy behaved, the way that Jagger behaved, kind of all possibly could have indicated red flags that lead us into thinking that foul play was involved. It's difficult to acknowledge and accept sometimes when your theory that you were absolutely convinced about was wrong. But you've got to take the totality of the evidence into consideration. And if you do, and you're open-minded and you're willing to accept that evidence, then looking at true crime, studying true crime cases becomes easier. That's just my opinion. But a lot of people in my comments said, Michelle, you're not an expert. You're not a medic. You're not a pathologist. No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm a doctor. I have a PhD, but it's in psychology. I'm not an MD. I'm not a pathologist. I'm not a forensic pathologist. So I understand when people say, Michelle, you're not an expert. However, I did human biology in college many, many years ago. So things like body parts, organ systems, histology, physiology, anatomy. I'm familiar with all of that stuff. Yes, it's many years ago, but I've always had an interest. And my interest in pathology is, some would say, macabre, but I just find it really interesting. So I'm self-taught, and I'm not saying that I know everything there is to know about pathology or its subfield, even more specialised forensic pathology. I'm not, but I can read an autopsy report. So I don't know, accept that or not, I guess. However, many people said, well, I'm going to wait until Barbara Butcher speaks. Now, Barbara Butcher appears on DutyRon's channel semi-regularly when there's things to talk about, autopsies and so on. Barbara appears as a guest on DutyRon's channel. And last night, she was on DutyRon with Ron and Ed Wallace. And there was also a guy on who was a forensic pathologist called Thomas Young. He did about the first half hour. And I am so pleased that DutyRon got a forensic pathologist on. So not just somebody who is knowledgeable about crime scene investigation and death investigation, but an actual forensic pathologist. It's a very specialised field, and he said very clearly that there's nothing unusual about this autopsy report. He talked about drowning. Water in the lungs isn't indicative necessarily of drowning. You can have water in your lungs for other reasons. But similarly, in Kiely's case, there was no water in her lungs. Her organs had shrunk, not just her lungs, but her heart, her kidneys, her liver, because of the amount of time that she'd spent, sadly, underwater. She'd been underwater 2 weeks. And the decomposition noted by the forensic pathologist Dr. Gregory Reiber, who did her autopsy, noted all of this. Organs shrink due to decomposition. It's common sense. Honestly, it's common sense. The decomposition increases, and he noted that decomposition was moderate and in some cases, particularly on her head and on her face, was severe. The mandible and the maxilla were exposed, and her internal organs had experienced moderate decomposition. What Dr. Thomas Young said was that due to her being underwater, and particularly in fresh water, through the process of osmosis, any water that she'd have taken in to her lungs upon drowning has found its way out into the tissues. It moves through osmosis, through just moving naturally through the tissues. He also said that the toxicology report was a standard one. It was a normal toxicology report. So if you look at Kiely's autopsy and the toxicology report, it was done by NMS Labs. You see NMS Labs being used a lot in autopsy reports. And you've got the positive findings, and then you've got the test, which is the post-mortem expanded tissue test. What this lab don't do is put every single test on this autopsy report, because it would be pages and pages and pages long. So they note the test that was done, they note the type of tissue that was used. They also note other specific tests that were done, cocaine and metabolites. There was confirmation, but they don't appear in the positive findings, the overall positive findings, because they didn't meet the reporting limit. Looking at that test number, all you have to do is go to the NMS Labs website, look up that test, and it tells you all of the drugs and the metabolites that that test does. And you'll see it's about 170 different tests, different drugs tested for. Fentanyl is there. Now, could Kiely have been poisoned using some bizarre, unusual toxin? Yeah. That's never tested? Yeah. But that would take a massive amount of premeditation, an expert in forensics, in forensic toxicology, to be able to think about what drug would not be tested for when Kiely was murdered. The chances of these things occurring are minuscule. This is a party of kids, some of them still at high school. The probability is so low. I'm not prepared to go down that route. I'm not. Another issue that Dr. Young quashed was the fact that only liver tissue was tested. People have said the fact that they tested only liver tissue is a problem, that they've not been thorough enough, etc., etc., etc. That's not true. As I've said in my videos, when a body has been underwater for 2 weeks and there's decomposition, getting blood, getting urine, even getting vitreous fluid from the eyeballs is not possible. What we saw in Kiely's autopsy report is that her face had experienced significant severe decomposition and the eyes were compromised. So they had to use a tissue sample. There's nothing unusual about this whatsoever. You know, they could have used spleen tissue, but liver tissue is better because the metabolism of toxins, of drugs, is done in the liver. So the liver tissue is a good place to get a toxicology sample from. So I'm very glad that DutyRon had Barbara and Thomas on the show. And with a drowning, it's a diagnosis or a verdict of exclusion, and they also consider the circumstances of which Kiely was found. She was missing, her vehicle was missing, her vehicle was recovered, her body was inside. Yes, she would have been positively identified. There was a number of ways that she could have been identified, so it definitely is Kiely. They look at the totality of the evidence of the circumstances, as well as the indications from the toxicology report, from the autopsy. It's the totality of the evidence that's important. Now, there's something that's missing from the case at the moment, and that is the California Highway Patrol's accident report. That is not out yet. Now, the channel Plunder has requested the records. She's received a reply from the California Highway Patrol, and this is a screenshot from her video. The California Highway Patrol received your records request on October the 17th for records related to an incident involving Kiely Rodni. The Public Records Unit has determined the department possesses records responsive to your request. However, these records are being withheld pursuant to Government Code Section 6254 and general and material otherwise disclosable under Section 524F may still be withheld under the investigatory privilege if disclosure of that material would endanger the safety of a witness or other person involved in an investigation, or endanger the successful completion of the investigation or a related investigation. Is it quite possible that they've not yet finished their investigation and therefore the records are being withheld because they're not ready to release them yet? Or are we never going to see it? Are we never going to see that report? Possible. It's possible we'll never see that report. But even in the absence of that report, if that never sees the light of day, we can still conclude that Kiely Rodni's death was a tragic accident. No one else was involved. It's excluding every possible foul play method that could be evident in some way on her body. All of it's been excluded. And there'd have to be an incredibly low probability that some unusual way to kill her had been executed that isn't possible to find from toxicology. It's so unlikely given the people who were at that party. So those who were doubting, who were waiting for Barbara Butcher, how are you now satisfied that this was an unfortunate, tragic accident? Kiely drowned, and that's all there is to it. I hope people are, but it's difficult. It's difficult, I understand, to be wrong about a theory, to have looked at those friends and thought they're really suspicious. But we've got to acknowledge that Sammy lied for her own reasons, probably for her 15 minutes of fame. She wasn't a close friend of Kiely. People said that. She most probably didn't get a phone call from Kiely at 12:36. Kiely was already dead by then. Is it possible she was wrong about that time? Yes, it is. The timeline that the Jane Does kind of gave, where Kiely was alive after 12:33, wasn't true. They were either lying, Elsa was lying, or she was mistaken that everything happened earlier. But we've got to acknowledge that the forensic evidence, the surveillance evidence, is much stronger than that of some friends who, for their own reasons, are lying or are mistaken. It's much stronger evidence. Forensic science is much stronger evidence than a couple of 18-year-old young women who just want to lie to social media. Maybe they've lied to social media on purpose, to wind people up. Who knows? Because we don't know the results of the police interviews, do we? We don't know that. Allegedly they've interviewed 300 teenagers. That's what they said. If you're still not convinced, that's fine. That's your call. That's up to you. But I am. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there for today. Hop over to Michelle Walks later today to listen to me going through Serenity McKinney's autopsy report. As I said at the beginning, it's not for everybody. There's a big trigger warning involved in that video. Okay, guys. Goodbye from Miss Tillington, Miss Cassie Springer, and I'll see you very soon in the next video. Bye, guys.